strong, women are this, women are that. And it brought me right back to Esther for this Bible study. My wife said that, you know what? The sermon kind of made her want to dig a little bit deeper and find out more information on the story of Esther. And as I watched the inauguration, I'm like, this seems like what happened in the book of Esther. All of the, the points that had happened, it seemed that as though we were living that over again. So I'm going to go and we're going to dig a little bit deep into Esther. Not sure if we're going to get through the whole book of Esther or not, but at least we're going to attempt to start it. Now, one thing that I would like to let you know before you read Esther is that the name of God is not mentioned at all in the book of Esther. And a lot of people may say, well, if God isn't mentioned in it, then God isn't in it. So why are we reading it? But that's not true. I think that God was not mentioned in the book of Esther because at times we are in situations where we're not thinking about God. We're living our life in a kind of way that we're not even really concerned about what God is doing for us, what God has done for us, and what God is going to do for us. So when you think about the fact that God wasn't mentioned in Esther, it's almost like, God's name is not out there. So think about when we go through these points and we read the text, just think about the fact that when you're living your life and you may not be living a life that is pleasing to God, he still hasn't forgotten about you. Just because he's not mentioned doesn't mean that he still doesn't have his hands on you. So let's go to the book of Esther. Keep that in mind. I'm going to share my screen here. And as I said, not going to be a bunch of wooing and wowing. But so we're starting off with the first chapter. And it's pretty much Queen Vashti disobeys the king. As you can see it on your screen, verse 1 says, this is what happened during the time when Xerxes was king. Xerxes ruled over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. So keep this in mind that this guy was a ruler over many. He ruled a lot of people here. King Xerxes ruled from his throne in the capital city of Susa. So that's where they were, in Susa. Verse 3 says, in the third year of Xerxes' rule, he gave a party for his officials and leaders, the army leaders and important leaders from all of Persia and the Media were there. So pretty much, let me make it plain for you. This powerful king, Xerxes, lived in a place called Susa, the capital city of Persia. And in the third year of his reign, he had a huge party and he invited the media. He invited everybody else. He liked to be seen. Now, does that not sound like somebody? Very powerful, ruler over many, like to be seen, like to have the media around. Verse 4 says, the party continued for 180 days. All during this time, King Xerxes was showing the great wealth of his kingdom and the majestic beauty and wealth of his place. So he was showing off. That's just how a lot of men or a lot of people do. When they get things, they can't keep it to themselves. Keep in mind, there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram, no TikTok, no Snapchat, none of that social media back then. So he wanted to celebrate for 180 days to make sure that when those guests left, they knew that his career was the best. He was the man. Nobody could challenge him. And when the 180 days were over, King Xerxes gave another party that continued for 7 more days. So this is the after party of the party. This place was lit, as they say. It was held inside the garden of the palace. All of the people who were in the capital city of Susa were invited, from the most important to the least important. Now he's inviting everybody to this party. Verse 6, the inside garden had a white and blue linen hanging around the room. They were held in a place with cords of white linen and purple material and silver marble pillars. There were couches made of gold and silver. So pretty much this place was laid out. So they led him into the inner courts, into the inner garden, and the place was amazing. It says that the wine cups were gold and they were all different. This place was amazing. So what we have here is a leader. If you go to verse 8, it says the king had given commandments to his servants. He told them each guest must be given as much wine as he wanted. Then the wine server obeyed the king. Keep in mind, bunch of men at a party, rich guy, they're drinking as much as they want. Now they're drunk. His wife, Queen Vashti, in verse 9, also gave a party for the women in the king's palace. I mean, this place was jumping. You got a men's party over here, a women's party over there. Now, what do? What do you think happened? I'll wait for you to answer. Don't be so super spiritual here. If you have a party and you have a lot of drunk men in one party, and then another party that's not far away from you, you got a lot of women. You got a room full of drunk men, a room full of women. Of course, eventually, they're going to want to intermingle. So what did King Xerxes do? Let's go to the word. It says that on the seventh day of the party, King Xerxes was high in spirits from drinking. What this means is he was drunk. He was towed up from the floor up. He gave a commandment to the 7 eunuchs who served him. The eunuchs were Mima, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass. He commanded them to bring Queen Vashti to him wearing her royal crown. She was to come so that she could show her beauty to the leaders and important people. She was very beautiful. So that's what he did. He got drunk. He had this big party. It went over, 7 days over. And on the last day, he's already showed off all of the fine jewelry. He showed off he showed off the furniture. He showed off the gold cups. And I'm going to get you. I'm going to show you something that I know you ain't got. You might have this, you might have that, but you ain't got a woman like Vashti. My queen is the best of the best. She got it going on. All right? Think about it. But why would you want to do that? Why would you want to be in a place that you have something great like a queen, and now you want to show her off in the front of a bunch of drunk men? It does not make sense. Sometimes people in leadership, they want to flex their power around and show off things that don't need to be shown off. It's okay that you have a great wife, but you don't need to flaunt her around a bunch of drunk and ignorant men, especially if it's the only reason you're trying to show her off is because she's beautiful. I think that I have a beautiful wife. I post pictures of her all the time, but it's not in a seductive manner to show off in front of my boys. That's not the reason for that. So what did the queen do? Did she do what the king told her to do, or did she not? Verse 12 says, but when the eunuchs told Queen Vashti about the king's commands, she refused to come. Then the king was very angry. So he got mad because she didn't want to come do something that was immoral. Sometimes people in leadership get upset if they're leading the wrong way, that you don't want to do something that goes against your morals. They want you to bend your morals to please them, and the only reason that they're doing it is to please someone else. Think about it. Verse 14 says, it was the custom for the king to ask the advice of the experts about the law and punishments. So King Xerxes spoke with the wise men who understood the laws. They were very close to the kings. Their name was Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Mersis, Mersina, and Mucum. They were the 7 most important officials of Persia and Media. They had special privileges to see the king. They were the highest officials in the kingdom. The king asked them, what does the law say must be done to Queen Vashti? She has not obeyed the commands of King Xerxes that the eunuchs had taken to her. This is what we need to stop. So you are the king. That means you are in control. Why are you asking someone lower than you to give you advice on what you should be doing when you already know what you should be doing. That's a problem that we have in this culture, in this community. We have people in leadership positions. We have people that are put in a place of influence, and instead of them studying up on their own laws, instead of them having their own moral compass, they go to a group of individuals, a council, and get advice on what they should do. Keep in mind that it's not their wife, it's not their queen that's not responding. It's his queen. That's what you don't need to do. Don't let somebody, in the words of a guy that told me something, don't let somebody outside your house tell you what to do inside your house. You shouldn't do that. Brother Odom said, Deacon Odom said, don't let nobody tell you nothing about your wife. He had already messed up because he tried to flaunt her. That was the first mistake. The second mistake was, now I'm going to ask somebody else to give me advice about my house. Whatever you're doing, you need to be studied up on that. Don't ask somebody marriage advice if you're single. If you're the head of the job, make sure you know the job so you don't have to go and get somebody else's advice, because you know what? You can delegate authority, but you can't delegate responsibilities. No, you can delegate responsibility, but you can't delegate accountability. So he's still going to be held accountable for what goes on in that house, in that kingdom. God, even though he's not mentioned, is still going to hold him accountable for what goes on. So if you are the man of your house and you make a decision, you're going to be held accountable for that. If you allow someone else to make a decision on what happens in your house, you're still going to be held accountable. So you best well be the one making the decisions, okay? Verse 16, they answered the king with the other officials listening. Queen Vashti has done wrong. She has done so wrong against the king and against the leaders of the people, all the provinces of King Xerxes. I say this because all the other women will hear about Queen Vashti and what she did. They will then stop obeying their husbands. They will say to their husband, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought to him, but she refused to come. Stop. So here's another mistake. They're making their decisions based off of what could happen because of what one woman did. They're assuming that the other women would do it too. That's not completely true. Okay, so because of what his wife did, now he puts on the peer pressure and says, well, look, man, you got to get your woman in line, because if you don't get your woman in line, then my woman's going to come to me and say that, well, the king ain't even doing, like, his woman ain't even got to listen to him. That has nothing to do, once again, with your house. Okay, so don't compare your house to somebody else's house. And that's exactly what they did here. Okay, so let's go back to the scripture. So today, the wives of Persian and Median leaders have heard what the queen did, and those women will be influenced by what she did. They will do the same thing to the king's important leaders, and they will be plenty of disrespect and anger. So instead of them having the confidence that they're going to be the men of their houses and take care of their business, they got insecure. See, when you have a leader that is insecure, they will push their weight around and try to force themselves on you because they're really insecure about themselves. Okay? So if it pleases the king, here's a suggestion. Let the king give a royal command and let it be written in the law of Persia and Media. The laws of Persia and Media cannot be changed. Keep in mind, when you write something down, you write it down. When you put something out there, it's out there. It said the laws of Persia cannot be changed. The royal command should be that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Let the king also give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. So this fool done got drunk, had a big party, and he acting out. He acting like a little baby right now, not Little Baby the rapper. He's acting immature, and now he's allowing his counsel to tell him what to do with his woman. So they say she shouldn't even be allowed to be in his presence anymore, and go find you somebody better. So they want you to start over with your relationship because you had one relationship problem. That's how people do. When you ask them marriage advice, you ask them advice about what goes on in your house, they'll give you the extent. Meanwhile, they got things going on in their own home that they won't address, that they won't take care of, but they want you to jump off the bridge. And really what it is, they want you to test out the waters so they can say, okay, well, this is what divorce is like. This is what's, this little dummy that let his homeboys talk him out of his marriage. Please don't do that. If you're married, you're going to have marriage problems, okay? You're going to. Don't let Johnny, Pookie, one of your homeboys and all of them make you feel like you need to let your wife go because she didn't cook or she disrespected you. Guess what? The next chick gonna do it too. You gotta get something together. You gotta communicate. Don't allow someone else to make a decision that affects your entire life. Verse 20, then when the king's command is announced in all parts of his large kingdom, all the women will respect their husbands. Why can't they just respect their husband because he deserves respect? So these are some insecure men. Keep in mind that they're drunk here. So they probably aren't respectable anyway. They're sitting around drunk as a skunk, wanting a woman to walk by so they can hoot and holler at her. The king and his important officials were happy with this advice. So King Xerxes did as Memucan suggested. King Xerxes sent letters to all parts of the kingdom. He sent them to each province, written in his own language. He sent them to each nation, written in its own language. These letters announce in each person's language that every man is to be ruler over his own family. So think about what happened here before we go on to chapter 2. Chapter 1 encompasses, you got a beautiful queen, very beautiful, in a great kingdom. And you got a ruler, Xerxes. And he's having this huge party. Him and the guys got drunk. He wants to show off his woman. She says no. He asks his drunk friend, what should he do? And his drunk homeboys tell him, man, get rid of her. Because if your woman disrespect you, then my woman gonna disrespect me. And he listened to him. He didn't pray about it. He didn't speak to God about it. Keep in mind, God is not mentioned in the book of Esther. So when you don't have God in your life, you still can rise in your position. You can be a leader, but you're going to make some poor decisions if your counsel is going to be drunk men instead of God. You're going to make some bad decisions. See, if God had been in this, he probably wouldn't have asked her to come out there anyway. See, you don't need to ask for something if you're not ready for the answer. See, he thought he was going to be able to say what he wanted to say. She was going to come out, they was going to hoot and holler. He flaunting, party ends, everything's great. That's not the way it works. Make sure that you learn a lesson from this. If you don't have God somewhere in your midst, if he's not mentioned in your day-to-day routine, you still can be successful, but you're going to make a lot of dumb decisions. I have no better way of saying that. Let's go over to chapter 2. Esther made queen. So later, King Xerxes stopped being angry. Then he remembered Vashti and what she had done. So he had got over it now. He remembered his commands about her. Then the king's personal servants had a suggestion. Once again, taking suggestions from somebody else. They said, search for a beautiful young virgin for the king. Let the king choose leaders in every province of his kingdom. Then let the leaders bring every beautiful young virgin to the capital city of Susa. These young women will be put with the group of the king's women. They will be under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Then give beauty treatments to all of them. Then let the one who is pleasing to the king become the new queen in Vashti's place. The king liked this suggestion, so he accepted. This guy. Now there was a Jew from the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai. The Persians don't like the Jews, in case you didn't know that. Mordecai was the son of Jair, and Jair was the son of Shimei, and Shimei was the son of Kish. Mordecai was in the capital city, Susa. Now, this is the same place that the king was in. Mordecai had been carried into captivity from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. He was with the group that was taken into captivity with the king Jehoiakim of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah. She didn't have a father or mother, so Mordecai took care of her. Mordecai had adopted her as her own daughter. When her father and mother died, Hadassah, who also called Esther, she had a very pretty face. So Mordecai, a Jew, who was brought into captivity from Jerusalem by King Nebuchadnezzar, he took care of his niece, Hadassah. Never heard her called that. She was also named Esther. She had a very pretty face and a good figure. Notice that she had a very pretty face and a good figure. Try to think of some other way of saying that, but she was bad, pretty much. She was young, she was a virgin, she looked good, and she had a banging body. When the king's command had been heard, many young women were brought to the capital city of Susa. They were put under the care of Haggai. Esther was one of these women. She was taken into the king's palace and put into Haggai's care. Haggai was in charge of the king's women. He liked Esther. She became his favorite. So he quickly gave Esther beauty treatments and special food. He chose 7 slave women from the king's palace and gave them to Esther. Then he moved Esther and 7 women and her 7 women servants into the best place where the king's women lived. Esther didn't tell anyone she was a Jew. She didn't tell anyone about her family background because Mordecai had told her not to. So now you have Mordecai, a Jew, who was brought out of captivity by King Nebuchadnezzar. He's in the royal city of Susa. And the king was searching for his next queen. He had a beautiful, bad, banging niece. He sent her over there. He told her that don't tell this man you are a Jew. And she didn't. So she's in the kingdom, and the king pretty much liked her vibe. So he said, let's expedite this thing. So keep in mind, when somebody has favored you, what used to take a long time is going to be quick for you. And it may just be the fact that you are beautiful. Sometimes looking good and being in the right place in the right time gives you favor. But when you have favor, your blessings get elevated. They get increased and expedited. Now, don't think about it looking good in a physical way. What if that you're looking good on your job? You're looking good at your craft. What if you are good at what you do? My wife is a handy woman as far as she makes crafts, and she can watch a YouTube video and now she's making wreaths. And she watches a YouTube video and now she's making bows, or she's making candles, or she's doing this or that. She's good at what she does. She has received favor from God. So now she shouldn't be shocked if her blessing is expedited. Okay. So what did the king do? He put her in the beauty, pretty much started hooking her up, gave her 7 servants. Now, this is a person that had a sticky background. First, she was a Jew, so she wasn't even supposed to be there. So let that be a note. You're going to be in places that you're not supposed to be because your background and your family history says you're not supposed to be there. But when you have God in your life, you will find yourself in places that people thought you would never be. You will find yourself in places that you know you're not qualified to be, but it will be because you're great at what you do. And then you'll find yourself getting elevated. You will find yourself being favored amongst others. And then the king gave her servants. So now God has given you someone to help you achieve your goals. Let's go back to the word because this is not a sermon. Okay, so once again, what I left out, you don't have to tell everybody about what you went through. You don't have to tell everybody about your family background. Everybody ain't got to know your business when you get to that new job. The worst thing you can do is you get the job, you pretty much a shoe-in, and in the interview, you start telling them about all the bad stuff you did on your last job. Are you trying to get the job or not? Okay. Verse 11, every day Mordecai walked back and forth near the area where the king's women lived. He did this because he wanted to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. So he didn't forget about his niece. He didn't just drop her off and leave her. Before a young woman could take her turn to go in before King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. So think about this. If you are a queen like you say you are, and you're a king like you say you are, what if before you got married that you had to have 12 months of beauty treatments or marriage treatments before you got married? There's marriage counseling. Some of us need to have marriage counseling before we jump up and put a ring on it. I know all the proposals are cute, all that stuff is good, but that stuff doesn't prepare you for what's going to happen after you say I do. Life would be a lot better if you prepared yourself for what you're going into. Verse 13, when her time came to go into the king, she could choose to wear or take whatever she wanted from the women's living area. In the evening, the young women would go in the king's palace, and in the morning she would return to another area where the king's women lived. Then she would be placed under the care of a man named Shagaz. He was the king's eunuch in charge of the slave women. She would not go back into the king unless he was pleased with her. Then he would call her by name to come back to him. Verse 15, the time came for Esther to go to the king. She was the one Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle, Abihail. All she wanted to take with her was what Haggai, the king's officer in charge of the women, suggested. Everyone who saw Esther liked her. Another pause. When you are ready to go in front of the king, when you're ready to present yourself, only thing you need is what you have. Take a lesson from Esther. She didn't go and ask for a bunch of stuff. She didn't decorate herself. She didn't go and be extra. Sometimes we miss out on our blessing because we feel like we have to go and act like somebody we're not. God is looking for you. He's not looking for another clone of someone else. So stop trying to be someone else. You'll get the job if you be yourself. You'll get the wife if you be yourself. You'll get the promotion if you be yourself. You'll get the raise if you be yourself. You'll get what you're looking for if you first be yourself. Stop trying to be someone else. Stop trying to add onto what God already perfected. He doesn't make mistakes. Okay? Let's move forward. So Esther was taken to the king Xerxes in the palace. This happened in the 10th month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his rule. So look at the timeline here. 3 years, he had this big party. Let his dumb homeboys is drunk. They got drunk, got rid of his queen. Now we're at 7 years, okay? It took 1 year to get her prepared, even though her thing was expedited. She got that shipment real quick. I mean, she must have been bad. This man said, no, hey, that one. Go on, make sure, can we get her paperwork in right now? I need to see this one. So we're talking about 4 years later, because it's at the 7th year of his rule. Then the king loved Esther more than any of the other young women, and she became his favorite. He approved of her more than any of the others. So King Xerxes put a crown on Esther's head and made her the new queen in place of Vashti. And the king gave a big party for Esther. It was for all of his important people and leaders. He announced a festival in all the provinces and sent out gifts to people because he was a generous king. Now I'm reading this and I'm like, dude, this is where you went wrong last time. You had a good woman and you had a party. At what point do you stop partying? At what point are you, I'm talking to you on the screen now, are you going to realize I made a mistake here and it didn't work out? So I'm going to go around talking to myself too. And I'm going to make the same mistake over and over and over. So I'm thinking as I'm reading this, that it's got to end wrong. It's got to end bad. But we're going to keep going here. Mordecai learns about an evil plan. So Mordecai was sitting next to the king's gate. At the time, the young women were gathered together the second time. Esther had still kept a secret that she was a Jew. She had not told anyone about her family background. This is what Mordecai had told her. She still obeyed Mordecai, just as she had done when he was taking care of her. During the time Mordecai was sitting next to the king's gate, this happened. Bigtha and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry with the king. They began to make plans to kill King Xerxes. But Mordecai learned about these plans and told Queen Esther. Then she told the king. She also told him that Mordecai was the one that had learned about the evil plan. So the king doesn't know that they're related, by the way. Keep that in mind. Then the report was checked out. It was learned that Mordecai's report was true. The two guards who had planned to kill the king were hanged on a post. And all these things were written down in the book of the king's histories in front of the king. So now, look how this thing works out. A guy who wasn't supposed to be at the gate ended up saving the king's life. The only reason he was at the gate is because he was watching out for the queen, who was his niece. Sometimes you are in the wrong place for the right reason, and something good will happen as a result of it. Now, ain't it something how the king's own men was upset with him and they plan to take him out? Sometimes the people that are closest to you, the people that you employ, the people that you are financing will get upset with you because of the decision that you made, and they'll try to take you out. And that's similar to what happened at the Capitol. How do you just walk into the Capitol building, knocking stuff over, climbing walls, and there's certain people that can't even walk in their own neighborhood without getting killed, without getting questioned by Karens? Do you live here? Can I see your ID? But the people who should have been on guard, they were upset about something else that had happened. So they weren't on their guard. So as a Jew who the Persians don't really like is watching after his folks, he ended up watching after the king's back. And the queen did what she should have done, and she told her husband. And then they researched it, and then they hung him. Another note from this: when you hear information, don't just jump off the deep end, go popping off. Do your research and find out if it is valid. If it is valid, then you act. But just because you're having pillow talk with somebody, don't mean it's true. They could be telling you something just to get in your ear. All right? So I want you to keep in mind, we'll stop there, but keep in mind what we have here. Chapters 1 and 2 of Esther, and you have one queen that's put out. You have a drunk king and his drunk homeboys. God is not mentioned, and they're making bad decisions. And now you have a niece of Mordecai, who's a Jew, who's keeping her identity a secret. She's not letting the king know who she is, which kind of makes me think, do you really know who you married to? Like, are we married to people and don't really know who we're married to? Like, anyway, whole nother story, whole nother day. But then Mordecai always checked on his niece. So he just stood on his guard. Stay on your guard, folks. If you're watching out for somebody, stay on your guard. The devil's busy. So as he was on his post, as he was on his guard, checking on his people, he heard the men who should be guarding the king talking junk about them. Are we going to take him out? We mad. He reported it immediately, expeditiously to his niece, who took care of the situation. That's where we're going to stop. We're going to pick up next week in the book of Esther. Let's pray. God, thank you for this word. Thank you for the new revelation. My prayer is that someone is blessed by this reading. I hope we all find ourselves somewhere in this story, and that we never forget to keep your name in it. With all the names that we have in our mouth, we want to make sure God's name stays in our mouth. God bless us and allow us to be prosperous. In your name we pray, amen. I hope you guys enjoyed this Bible study lesson. I know it was very textual, and we'll keep doing that because we do want to increase our depth of knowledge when it comes to the Bible. If you want to give to the church, Cash App, BTR Global, make sure you go to our website, betheram.com. And if you like this, if you learned something, let me know. Drop a comment, drop a like, share it. But until next time, this is Pastor Coach McKissick of Be the Ram Global Fellowship. I challenge you to win the 97% and be the ram in somebody's bush. God bless you, and I'm out.